Robert Robertson nodded and wished Amy Horner the best for her future. He assured her of positive references for any future job opportunities. Actually, Anthony and I have been discussing things. With his doctorate and new role at Mindy on the horizon, we're contemplating starting our family, Amy, the slender redhead, shared with enthusiasm. Robbie, to himself, couldn't help but reflect on Amy's past reputation as he watched her leave his office. Focusing on the task ahead, Robbie set out to find a new administrative assistant. Amy had proven to be a competent worker despite her controversial high school reputation. She was efficient, with a keen eye for detail, often catching errors from other departments. Public Utilities had a system where executives sourced administrative assistants from an internal pool whenever there was a vacancy. Robbie considered the available candidates, making note of 2 potential hires. However, he remembered that Kate Benson had reserved Margaret Murphy for the billings department. After narrowing down his choices, Robbie reviewed the personnel files. His initial preference was Crystal Hebert, recognizing her professional presentation and efficiency. However, her record showed disciplinary issues, leading Robbie to reconsider as he prioritized work ethic over appearance. Curiosity struck Robbie about a redacted entry in Crystal's file, a matter only the CEO could obscure. He wondered about the circumstances leading to such a decision. Turning his attention to Christine Gillery, Robbie found no concerns in her file. Yet, he felt a twinge of resentment recalling her husband, Stephen Gillery, a wealthy peer from his school days whom he never favored. Robbie's own school experience was marked by financial struggle and hard work, contrasting sharply with Stephen's privileged life. Even if her choice in partners isn't the best, perhaps she'll be a good fit here, Robbie thought to himself. Chrissy Gillery was quite the looker, a young blonde in her early 20s. While her figure wasn't as striking as Crystal's, Chrissy's appearance was still notably striking, and she carried herself with grace. Her long blonde hair, often tied in ponytails, swayed down to her lower back, highlighting her poise as she navigated the office corridors of a Public Utilities. Despite there being 4 other administrative assistants with better qualification and longer tenure at the company, Robbie felt compelled to choose his assistant based on whom he'd prefer to see daily. Among the candidates were a fervent activist, a woman who was openly distrustful of men, another who was significantly overweight, and one who was deaf. Despite their competencies, Robbie found himself unable to overlook these aspects. Chrissy interviewed well and seemed thrilled to secure a more stable position at Elizabeth Public Utilities. She and Amy collaborated effectively, and by the time Amy was ready to leave, Robbie was content with his choice. Meanwhile, Crystal Hebert faced her 3rd and final reprimand, leading to her dismissal from the company, a situation Robbie felt fortunate to have sidestepped, even as the details of Crystal's last warning remained unclear. "Good morning, Mr. Robertson," greeted Chrissy warmly on her first day working independently. The farewell gathering for Amy Horner in the break room was a modest yet pleasant affair. Anthony Horner, Amy's husband, still seemed unimpressive to Robbie, who couldn't help but muse over Anthony's obliviousness to his wife's past escapades, a topic of gossip among their peers. On a different note, Steve Gillery, Chrissy's spouse, arrived promptly at 6 to pick her up, causing a slight stir at the gathering. Chrissy's expression hinted at displeasure over her husband's abrupt entrance, and Steve's demeanor was far from pleased as he entered the midst of the small celebration. Robbie wasn't certain, but he thought he saw a faint mark on Chrissy's upper arm as she looked up at him with a smile, greeting him warmly on their first day working together alone. Robbie nodded and proceeded to his office. The week went smoothly. Chrissy was consistently early to the office, always engrossed in her work before Robbie arrived and still busy as he left each evening. Her work ethic was evident, and she maintained a professional demeanor and appearance. Her outfits were always elegant and well-kept, adding to her professional charm. Chrissy preferred skirts and dresses paired with stockings and modest heeled shoes. "So, any plans for the weekend?" Robbie asked in a friendly tone, holding his late afternoon cup of tea at his office doorway. "No, sir," Chrissy replied, her gaze lowered and her voice gentle. "Oh, I see," Robbie responded, a bit surprised. "Not out enjoying the evening with Steve, eh?" "No, why miss any sports on TV?" Chrissy said sarcastically. Robbie, remembering Steve's sports enthusiasm, nodded and entered his office. "Some people never change," Chrissy whispered to herself as Robbie's office door clicked shut. At 5:30, Chrissy's phone vibrated in her bag, hidden in the bottom drawer of her desk. At work, she kept her phone on silent, tucking it away in her large bag. She quickly answered the call. "Hello," she said. "Steve, we need to talk. And that situation with Amy, what a disaster." She arrived home late to find Steve already deep into his weekend relaxation, surrounded by empty beer cans, with the TV volume up high. The living room was dominated by an overly large television, a purchase Chrissy had objected to, preferring a smaller one, but Steve insisted on the larger model. "You're finally here," Steve remarked bluntly. "The pizza will be here soon." Chrissy, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation, paid for the pizza delivery, which arrived promptly. Steve had ordered his usual, without considering Chrissy's preferences. But that wasn't the fault of the delivery girl, so Chrissy offered a smile and handed the young delivery girl a $2 tip. Awesome, Stephen exclaimed as Chrissy placed his pizza on the table. And they're saying the storm's going to crush Connolly. How much did you bet on them? Chrissy inquired, skeptical of Stephen's excitement. Stephen didn't respond, just took a slice of pizza and opened another beer. Chrissy repeated her question about the bet, and Stephen turned up the TV volume. However, Chrissy persisted, even blocking the television view. 3, Stephen finally confessed, gesturing for Chrissy to move. 3 what, Stephen? She pressed. Not 300. Please, tell me it's not that. Darn. It's a sure thing, Stephen retorted, visibly annoyed. On Monday, Robbie noticed a bruise on Chrissy's face. She simply shook her head in response to his inquiry. When he insisted, Chrissy suddenly declared she needed to use the restroom and exited the room. On Tuesday, Robbie asked again, and Chrissy snapped that the storm had been defeated by Connolly, 12-3. That evening, Stephen questioned why Chrissy was late. After a pause, she reminded him of her job obligations. No, I get that, Steve interrupted, questioning her new arrival times. Mr. Robertson is an executive, Chrissy retorted. My hours vary now that I am his personal assistant. Steve, do you get it, or should I explain further? Why must you be so harsh about it? Steve responded irritably. Why must you be so clueless? Chrissy replied, removing her skirt. Hold on a minute, Steve said, noticing something. What now, Stephen? I'm exhausted, Chrissy said, holding up her skirt. Wow, when did you get those? Steve inquired, nodding towards Chrissy's eye-catching red undergarments. I'm not sure. Maybe last week or the week before. Chrissy replied casually. You're really splurging with your new job, Steve grumbled. It's not like you're earning heaps more, right? I earn enough, retorted Chrissy sharply. What about you? How much did you drop on the Atlanta Hawks game? Will you ever drop that subject? Steve responded, clearly annoyed. Probably around the same time my car broke down, Chrissy remarked. Went to sort it out and, lo and behold, the card was maxed out. I fixed it the very next day, but I have to hear about it every time anything goes wrong, don't I? Steve raised his voice. You didn't sort it out, Steve. You didn't. I did. I called my dad and got the money. It was me, Steve, Chrissy countered, her tone firm. Shortly after, Chrissy reappeared, now in shorts and a t-shirt, bustling about as she energetically prepared their dinner, which they ate mostly in silence, the sound of their forks against the plates filling the air. Later, Steve settled in front of the large TV while Chrissy engaged with a romance novel on her iPad. In the mornings, Chrissy tried to be quiet as she got ready for work, usually letting Steve sleep a bit longer. She would prepare her clothes the night before to minimize noise. Even sliding open the closet door to pick out shoes made some sound. After selecting her outfit for the next day, she headed to the bathroom, tossing her worn clothes into the laundry basket and preparing for bed. Seriously, you wear that to work? Steve remarked, noticing the delicate nightie Chrissy had on. What? Chrissy responded, giving a little twirl in her light outfit. You never wear anything like that for me, Steve noted, his eyes on the light lingerie set aside with the outfit for the next day. Pay me $18.50 an hour, and maybe I will, Chrissy snapped back, moving to the bathroom again. Oh great, are you going to hog the bathroom all night now? Steve exclaimed, heading to the other bathroom in frustration. Slipping into bed after a while, Steve reached over, attempting to caress Chrissy, but she briskly pushed his hand away and sat up, her expression stern. She adjusted her long shirt to cover more of herself. Seriously, ever since your promotion, Steve started to grumble. Chrissy fixed him with a severe look, cutting off his words. After a tense silence, she turned her back to him, arranged her pillow, and tried to sleep. Can't recall the last time we connected, Steve muttered. You might want to think about why that is, Chrissy retorted coldly, without moving. The following night, Steve couldn't locate his phone. It went straight to voicemail when Chrissy called it, indicating it was off or the battery was dead. Where have you been today? Chrissy probed. Steve, it's important not to misplace your phone. While Steve checked his truck, Chrissy searched inside, starting with the couch, suspecting Steve had been lounging there all day. The bedroom offered no clues to the phone's whereabouts. Chrissy was annoyed to see the bed unmade, mentally criticizing Steve's mother for pampering him too much and not teaching him basic household chores. And luckily, he's clueless about the laundry, Chrissy remarked, finally discovering the phone in the pants Steve had worn the day before. Amazing. Where was it? Steve brightened when Chrissy showed him the phone. The last place I checked, Chrissy responded. We really should set up that phone locator feature. Oh, by the way, tomorrow's Friday, right? Helen from accounting mentioned a girls' night out, just us from the office having a drink. Chrissy informed Steve as she prepared for the next day. Who's going to be there? Steve inquired with interest. If you listened more, you'd know it's the girls from the second floor, Chrissy replied tersely. In the early hours, Chrissy accidentally knocked her phone off the nightstand, dislodging it from its charger. As Steve awoke, he noticed Chrissy on all fours, searching for her phone in the dimly lit room, her silhouette outlined against the faint light. She was wearing a lacy black outfit that accentuated her figure elegantly. Upon standing, it was evident that Chrissy's attire provided a striking contrast against her skin. her outfit delicately framing her form. The room remained silent as she finished getting ready. Later that evening, Chrissy was on the phone, her laughter mingling with the lively tunes of Vermilion's band and the cheerful chatter of her colleagues from Elizabeth Public Utilities. The group, a mix of single and married women, enjoyed the festive atmosphere, with some dancing and socializing, while others, like Chrissy and her married colleague Jill, preferred to sit back and soak in the ambience. During the gathering, Chrissy's mood shifted abruptly due to a call from Steve. She tersely reminded him of her plans for the evening, her irritation palpable. Despite intending to leave earlier, Steve's intrusive call prolonged her stay. Returning home, Chrissy was greeted by a messy kitchen, a result of Steve's negligence, sparking her frustration. While grumbling about the untidiness, she changed into more comfortable attire and set about cleaning the mess herself, knowing it wouldn't be done otherwise. In the midst of her cleaning, Steve blurted out about his phone search, to which Chrissy responded with mild interest, her focus mainly on tidying up after him. "Think it through, Chrissy," Steve pressed, his tone edgy. "My phone was missing. How could I have used the Find My Phone feature?" "The iPad," retorted Chrissy. "But fine, Steve, you had your phone, so why the need to track it?" "To see where you were," Steve replied. "Vermilion. Come on, that place is notorious, and you're aware of it." "It's just a bar, Steve, like the Dead End, Reds, or that favorite of yours. What's it called?" "Sugar Shack," Chrissy countered. "It's a bar, they have live music." "How was your weekend?" Robbie inquired as he entered the office on Monday. "It started off pretty well," Chrissy responded. "Ever been to Vermilion's?" No, Samantha's been mentioning it." "Is it good?" Robbie paused at his office door, curious. "They have a small band on Fridays, play some really nice tunes," Chrissy shared. "And foxtrots, wow, I adore their big band music. My grandmother had all these old records, Ellington, Miller, Dorsey. We'd listen for hours." "Really?" Robbie looked genuinely entertained by Chrissy's passion. "You know what? I think we should try foxtrots next," Chrissy pondered aloud. On Friday afternoon, Chrissy hurried into their home, making a beeline for the bedroom while Steve sat absorbed in the TV, increasing the volume to mask the sound of the shower. "Dinner plans okay with you?" "Hamburger, steak, and noodles," Chrissy queried, entering the kitchen in her robe. "I thought you were heading to Vermilion," Steve remarked, hint of sarcasm in his voice. "Yes, but I thought it best to prepare your dinner before leaving," Chrissy replied, quickly getting the meal ready, especially after what happened previously. As Steve enjoyed his meal, Chrissy's suggestion that he might learn to cook soured his appetite. He questioned why he should bother learning. "Steve, what if something unexpected happens?" Chrissy explained patiently. "If I'm ill or need to travel for work. Remember, there's the annual commission conference in Washington." "You're not attending any conference," Steve asserted. "Anyway, it wouldn't hurt for you to learn how to cook without creating such a mess like you did last time," Chrissy replied nonchalantly. "Whatever," Steve muttered as Chrissy placed her dish in the dishwasher. "I mean, it's everywhere. How did you manage to splatter eggs on the wall?" "There's more there than what ended up on your plate," Chrissy remarked, moving swiftly out of the room. "Hey, wait a minute," Steve protested after a few moments as Chrissy walked past. Her skirt ended at mid-thigh, and she wore a light, semi-transparent blouse that hinted at the shape of her bra underneath. She had on high stiletto heels. "Goodbye," Chrissy said brightly as she exited the trailer. "Hey, I said, you can't go out like that," Steve bellowed, standing up from the table. But he was too late to catch her. Steve watched as his wife maneuvered her small car out of the trailer park and sped off along the road. "Think you're so clever, don't you?" Steve snickered to himself later, recalling the Find My Phone feature. Searching his pockets in vain for his phone, Steve finally found it between the couch cushions. He opened the Find My Phone app, confused to see it indicating she was still in the trailer. He even looked around. He called her cell phone, only to hear it ringing in their bedroom. There, he found her phone charging, suppressing the impulse to throw it against the wall. After another beer, Steve decided to drive to Vermilion to surprise Chrissy. She had often complained about them not spending time together. Well, he thought, they could share drinks and listen to music. But Chrissy was nowhere to be found in Vermilion. After checking the ladies' room and the parking lot, her car was nowhere to be seen. Later, a cheerful Chrissy returned to the trailer, humming a melody and teetering on her heels. "Where have you been?" Steve demanded, his grip tightening on Chrissy's arm. "I was out with friends," Chrissy replied, trying to ease her arm free. "We were at a band show." "Steve, you're being too rough. Please stop." "I checked there, and you weren't," Steve countered, his voice rising. "You weren't at Vermilion. We ended up at Foxtrot's." "Steve, you're hurting me. Let go," Chrissy pleaded. "And leaving your phone at home, so I couldn't reach you. Very convenient," Steve remarked bitterly. "It should be in my purse," Chrissy said, searching her bag. "Oh no, I must have left it charging." "Convenient mistake," Steve retorted. "I haven't done anything to be spoken to like this," Chrissy responded firmly. "I don't deserve this language." Steve, fueled by his anger and refusal to apologize, was relentless. Chrissy knew arguing further would only escalate things. Resigning to the situation, she decided to sleep on the couch to avoid further confrontation. By Monday, the mark on Chrissy's arm was noticeable. Robbie, trying not to pry, eventually gave in to his curiosity. He was upset because he couldn't find me, Chrissy explained softly. My phone was left behind. At the trailer, Robbie inquired, surprised. But I thought Steve's family was wealthy. They were, until the debts piled up, Chrissy clarified, her smile strained. After his dad left, the financial burden fell on us. Robbie couldn't hide a knowing smile at the revelation. That evening, Chrissy attempted to show Steve how to cook with andouille sausage, talking him through the steps while he mostly ignored her. It's 1 cup of rice to 2 cups of water and just a bit of salt, Chrissy instructed. Remember, it's easier to add more than to remove it. I'm trying to listen to the news, Steve interjected, cutting off her culinary guidance. They consumed their red beans and rice without speaking. Steve noticed his wife's unusual silence. Normally, she was quite talkative. However, he didn't feel inclined to inquire about her quietness. On Tuesday, she attempted to teach him how to prepare skillet chicken with cream gravy, but Steve grew impatient with her constant talking. By Thursday, following a delightful lasagna dinner, Chrissy advised Steve on how to reheat the leftovers she had set aside for him. After giving her instructions, she left the room, allowing Steve some quiet time. Shortly after, Steve was startled by a loud scream from the bathroom. He rushed to see what had happened. "Damn it," Chrissy was exclaiming, pacing around the bathroom. "What on earth? What happened?" Steve asked urgently. Taking a deep breath, Chrissy turned to him, partially clothed, and pointed towards her lower body. "It's just that I knew it would hurt a bit," Chrissy explained, breathlessly showing Steve a strip of tape with hairs attached. "But this is really painful." To Steve's surprise, Chrissy forcefully removed the remaining tape, causing her to move about in discomfort. "Ouch, ouch, ouch," Chrissy muttered, dabbing her forehead with her shirt to wipe away sweat. "I really hope this soothing cream helps," she said. Grabbing a tube of cream from the counter, she applied it to the tender area, which Steve observed with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Hold on," Steve interjected. "You know I've mentioned this before, right? Why decide to do it now?" "Fine, you've been asking, and I finally did it. And this is how you react," Chrissy retorted, pulling on her comfortable shorts. She left the bathroom with the used strips of tape, pausing at the bedroom door to confront Steve with frustration in her voice. "Is there anything I can do that will make you happy, Steve? Anything at all, or are you just going to keep complaining?" she exclaimed. The next morning, still half asleep, Steve noticed Chrissy pointing out his leftovers in the fridge before she hurried out, dressed for work, with a nice dress and shoes in hand. "Come on, no way," Steve protested. "Enough with these girls' nights out, seriously." Chrissy's cell phone was off. Steve's frustrated messages went unanswered to her voicemail. By lunch, Steve was expecting a call, as Chrissy often checked her phone then. At 1:30 p.m., he left several more irritated messages and texted her, insisting she call him back at once. By 6:30 p.m., Steve's attempt at reheating lasagna had failed miserably. It had turned into an overcooked mess. What was the 50% power setting on this microwave? Chrissy had advised 5.5 minutes, with additional 20-second intervals if necessary. Chrissy usually served leftovers slightly warm, so Steve thought 6 minutes should suffice. Disappointed, Steve tossed the ruined lasagna away. The large foil pan in the microwave caused a cacophony of noises. Eventually, fed up with the racket, he hastily removed the pan, burning his hand in the process. The lasagna, ironically, was still cold inside. At 9:10 p.m., Steve used the Find My Phone app and found Chrissy still at Foxtrot's lounge. The 8 beers he had on an empty stomach convinced him to put an end to these girls' nights out once and for all. Chrissy and Robbie had just finished a lively and somewhat awkward Lindy Hop, with Chrissy's skirt revealing more than intended. As the music transitioned to a slow waltz, Robbie guided Chrissy into the dance, her protests lost in the moment. "Hey, back off," Steve shouted, storming over and confronting Robbie with a forceful punch. The impact sent Robbie tumbling, his earlier drinks at the bar not helping his coordination. The music halted abruptly when Robbie's head hit the bandstand's edge, causing the musicians to exchange worried glances. Steve then forcefully led his wife out of the club, with Chrissy trying to resist. Amidst the chaos, someone yelled for medical help, noticing Robbie's still form. "Don't bother," a nursing student said after checking and finding no vital signs. "Sir, take your hands off her," a formally dressed bouncer ordered, confronting Steve. "I called the police," announced Whitney Simpson, the front desk receptionist of St. Elizabeth Public Utilities, as Steve and the bouncer scuffled. The second bouncer and the bass player joined in to restrain Steve until the Bender police arrived. It was no surprise to the employees of Foxtrot's that Matthew Anders, the manager, only emerged from his office once the police were present. On paper, Matthew Anders was an effective manager. The lounge was profitable, and the staff rarely changed. The men knew Matthew could be easily cowed, and the women had observed that a slight flirtation could easily sway him. Despite being married to Leslie Anders, Webb, the gossip among staff was about Matthew's lack of romantic experience. Leslie often found excuses to withhold affection from Matthew, always promising sweetness for favors but rarely fulfilling Matthew's desires. But, I'm the designated driver," Chrissy objected when Sergeant Darren Richards insisted she needed to visit the Bender Police Department for her statement. I will ensure your friends get home safely, Lieutenant Mike Stevens stammered, captivated by Whitney Simpson's presence. Yes, ma'am, we'll take care of it, Officer Brian chimed in, complimenting Whitney on her striking eyes. I haven't heard that before, Whitney responded, her light gray eyes meeting the officer's gaze. What about me? Do I have beautiful eyes too? Helen Mountain asked, trying to catch the officer's attention. Yeah, they're nice, Brian replied, still focused on Whitney. As the group moved toward the door, Joy teased Whitney about the attention she was receiving. Realizing his efforts were futile with Whitney, Officer Mike Stevens tried to engage Jill in conversation, but she humorously rebuffed him, mentioning her committed relationship with her same-sex partner. Joy Decker felt overlooked by the middle-aged African-American police officer, which only added to her sense of insecurity, especially when he paid her no attention. Chrissy arrived home exhausted at midnight, locked herself in, and collapsed onto her bed. Waking up past 10 the next morning, she refreshed herself with a hot shower, brewed some coffee, and then made a call to her mother-in-law, Edna Gillery, to explain the situation. During the call, Edna accused Chrissy of leading her son into trouble. Chrissy, taken aback, defended herself, insisting she had no role in the unfortunate incident. Edna ended the call with skepticism. Chrissy, frustrated, declared she wouldn't be responsible for solving the problem, suggesting Edna should deal with her son's issues. Unable to gather enough assets for bail, Edna contacted her ex-husband, Stephen's father, Andy. Reluctantly, he agreed to help, on the condition that Edna relinquish any claims to his retirement funds. Despite the tension, they managed to secure Stephen's release. After the court session, Edna and a dispirited Stephen left the courthouse. Remembering his vehicle was elsewhere, they retrieved it, and then went their separate ways to their homes in Kimball. Upon returning, Steve was greeted by Richard Boudreau, a neighbor, who noted Steve's absence earlier. The conversation hinted at the complexities and entanglements of their small community life. Yeah, got something for you. That's one of those hybrid trucks, right? Bernie keeps saying we should get one, but I'm not so sure, Richard remarked. You're Steve, aren't you? Steve Gillery, from St. Thomas, correct? Steve hesitated before responding. I am, and do I know you? And you've been served, Richard announced, handing Steve a manila envelope. No, wait, that's a diesel, not a hybrid. They haven't started making diesel hybrids, have they? I need to look that up. Steve stood there, taken aback, as Richard took a photo of him with the envelope. Richard continued to ramble about car engines, waved cheerfully at Steve, and then drove off in his Ford Taurus. Looks like she acted quickly, didn't she? Edna commented bitterly when Steve informed her that Chrissy had initiated the divorce. Trying to contact Chrissy proved futile for Steve. Her number was disconnected. Foolishly, he tried the Find My Phone app, only to find her number unavailable. The voice of Elizabeth Public Utilities greeted him, but he couldn't recall Chrissy's department extension. After listening through the directory and hitting 0 in desperation, only to be informed it was an invalid choice, his call ended abruptly. Elizabeth Public Utilities. The recording started again. Scheduling, Steve exclaimed, pressing the extension for it when it was mentioned. After being informed about the office hours and given an emergency contact, Steve was prompted to leave a message. Overcome with frustration, he left a heated voicemail before attempting to call Chrissy again, only to be told once more that the number was not in service. Going through the documents once more, Steve found the legalese baffling and decided to call his mother again for advice. My goodness, Stevie, exclaimed Edna, her voice sharp with alarm. Forget about that now. You're facing a serious situation. Someone has died. The divorce can wait. And, Stevie, I'm sorry, but I can't afford to hire a lawyer for you. You should talk to your father about this, okay? Oh, what a surprise. Look, Juliet, it's my son. Andy Gillery greeted with a mock enthusiasm. I bet he's calling to apologize for missing my birthday and Father's Day. That's it, right, son? Or is this call because you need something? Although sarcasm was usually lost on Steve, he could not miss the insinuation in his father's tone. Fighting down his discomfort, Steve tried to reconcile with his estranged father. Now, tell me, which is more pressing, Stevie? This divorce, and it's a shame about Chrissy, she's a wonderful person, or the mess you're in legally. Andy cut in before Steve could fully express his regret. What do you mean? Steve inquired, confused. Good Lord, Steve, you finished high school, remember? I was there at your graduation. So, what is it? Sorting out your divorce or staying out of jail? Andy pressed him. It's the jail issue, Steve replied hesitantly. Right, let me talk to Eric, a buddy of mine, Andy suggested. I'll update you after. Despite Eric Green offering a discounted rate for legal services through a family and friends discount, Andy was taken aback by the expenses. Eric hinted that the best outcome might be a plea for involuntary manslaughter. However, Steve had drunkenly admitted to Officer Darren Richards his intention of confronting anyone his wife might be with at Foxtrot's Lounge, suspecting it to be Chrissy's boss, Robbie Robertson. Despite their shared high school history, Steve felt Robbie bore him ill will, possibly motivating Robbie to get close to Chrissy. We might not be able to afford your fees, Andy pondered aloud. Things might have been different if he had stayed silent until getting legal representation, Eric pointed out. And what about public defenders? Andy inquired, sounding defeated. Believe it or not, there are some good ones out there, Eric remarked. How about dealing with a divorce? Andy changed the subject. Eric offered him a special family and friends rate. Andy agreed to pay Eric the fee and ended the call. Look, sport, Eric Green is out of our budget, Andy explained. But he's agreed to handle your divorce. Don't mention it, son. No need to thank me, Andy cut off Steve's objections. This mess is yours, not mine, but the funds are coming from me, not you. Steve's court-appointed lawyer was David Camo. Trying to lighten the mood, David joked about the past sports rivalry. He then hinted that perhaps Steve should have learned to stay quiet until he had legal representation. Really, Mr. Gillery, you told the police you went to the club intending to start a fight? David inquired. I was drunk, Steve muttered. Obviously, I can't imagine a sober person making such a mistake, David responded sharply. Leaving the lawyer's office, Steve realized he barely had enough money for a meal. Feeling defeated, he headed to his mother's house. It's going to be peanut butter and jelly again, no paycheck until the 3rd, Edna mumbled. Blessings, Steve responded, making himself a sandwich with the slightly stale bread. Who could that be? Edna wondered, hearing a knock at the door. Hi, I tried the bell a few times, then noticed the sign had fallen, said a friendly voice at the door. The darn nail keeps coming loose, Edna replied. Let me see if I can fix it for you, the visitor offered, as Steve continued eating. Finishing his sandwich, Steve learned from Edna that the visitor was looking for him. Confused, Steve approached the door to see who it was. Ah, not you again, Steve grumbled at Richard Boudreau. Hey, I was at your place, they're sorting out your screen door, Richard announced with a grin. But they mentioned you might be here, what with your place being on the market. Any idea what they're asking for it? Because Bernie's sister, Phyllis, is finishing school and is on the lookout for her own space. Strange, considering how well her mom cooks. Anyway, here you go, consider yourself officially notified. Richard captured a photo of Steve, visibly upset, receiving the envelope. Then he cheerily walked to his car, still babbling about his mother-in-law's culinary skills. Robbie Robertson's widow, Samantha, was taking legal action against Stephen Gillery for her husband's accidental demise. Not even Edna's remarks about the futility of the situation eased Steve's sour disposition. I wondered if she'd go through with it, David Camo remarked amiably during a call with Steve, hours later. But no, Mr. Gillery, that's a separate legal issue. It's not my field. Wait a second, Steve interjected. The trailer's being sold. Where on earth did Chrissy go? That's an excellent question, Edna remarked, glancing up from the TV. And she's got Penny Jones on her side. I doubt she's working pro bono, right? Tammy Hale, a realtor with Carmen Davis Realty, managed to secure a buyer for the trailer. Once all debts and repairs were settled, Steve's share amounted to $8,400. With this sum, he approached Eric Green from the law firm Banks, Chastain, Green & Associates. Penny Jones, representing Samantha Robertson, proposed delaying the civil lawsuit until after Steve's criminal trial concerning Robbie Robertson's demise. Eric managed to erase the smug look from Steve's face, explaining how a criminal conviction would simplify Penny's task in the civil lawsuit. And, Eric pondered, rifling through his papers. Ah, it appears Ms. Jones is also your wife's lawyer in your divorce proceedings. Isn't that, what do they call it? Double jeopardy, Steve inquired. And to think people mocked me for my public school education, Eric mused, shaking his head. I believe you're referring to a conflict of interest. And no, that's not the case, Eric clarified. The divorce proceedings were managed in Judge Marie Robichaux's office, with Penny and Eric both agreeing on how to split their assets, with no requests for mediation. After signing the documents and getting them stamped, the process was in motion to dissolve their marriage formally. It's always a sad affair, Penny remarked, laboriously standing up, her advanced pregnancy evident. Yes, Eric agreed. I think a mandatory reflection period before marrying might reduce these situations. Exactly, Penny nodded. It might help people realize that sometimes, what feels like forever is just temporary confusion. And, oh, remind Polly I haven't forgotten she poached Ashley from us. She was a stellar paralegal. Should we only take the less competent ones then? Eric joked, maneuvering his wheelchair alongside Penny. I'll draft you a list, Penny chuckled, holding the door for Eric. In another scenario, after a short deliberation, the jury found Steve guilty of manslaughter based on various testimonies. The judge thanked the jury and scheduled a sentencing date. Steve, it could have been harsher, David commented. They might have opted for a more serious charge. And leaving those voicemails at Chrissy's was not wise. Chrissy wasn't supposed to testify against me, right? Steve interjected. A spouse isn't supposed to, right? David responded with a mix of frustration and advice, pointing out that while a spouse might not be forced to testify, an ex-spouse could do so willingly. Eric Green spent $8,000 in legal fees to fight Samantha's lawsuit, which resulted in a symbolic victory for her, securing a settlement from Steve Gillery. However, given Steve's impending incarceration, the likelihood of Samantha receiving the settlement was slim. I still have feelings for you, Steve confessed to Chrissy, who looked back at him with detached calmness before offering a gentle smile. I still cared about you, she whispered before leaving the courtroom. Outside, Chrissy inhaled the fresh October breeze deeply. The air was cool and refreshing. With a gentle smile, she lightly jogged down the steps and made her way to her car. Heading north-northeast on Highway 19, Chrissy signaled and turned into the parking area of the Casual, a modest lounge that lacked any eye-catching flair. It was a simple cinder-block structure with an unassuming wooden door. The neon sign indicating the lounge was open glowed faintly, matching the unremarkable facade. The interior of the bar featured dark wood paneling and furniture, illuminated by subdued lighting. Soft piano melodies filled the room from speakers overhead. The atmosphere was not shabby or neglected, it was relaxed and welcoming. "Joe Bob, wasn't your doctor's advice?" An older man began. "Doctors are clueless," grumbled an elderly, inebriated man. "That's why it's called practicing medicine, right? They're still figuring it out." Chrissy took a seat on a plush leather bar stool next to Samantha Robertson. They exchanged smiles through the reflection in the bar's mirrored back wall. "What can I get for you lovely ladies?" Terry asked, shifting his focus from Joe Bob. "Did you hear about Chelsea Duhon on the news?" "You carry that vintage whiskey?" inquired Samantha. "That would be Oakleaf," confirmed Terry. $25 per serving. "Let's have it," Chrissy decided. "One for each of us. It's not every day you win $500,000, joked Samantha. "Well, look at that," Terry exclaimed, grinning. "Just kidding, she won't actually receive any of it," Chrissy chuckled. Terry filled 2 glasses with the amber whiskey. Samantha and Chrissy tapped their glasses together in a quiet celebration, each taking a moment to enjoy the whiskey's rich aroma and flavor. "Ah, that's really nice," Samantha commented appreciatively. "Absolutely," Chrissy concurred. Terry busied himself with serving a draft beer to a very large customer. Samantha's gaze returned to the mirror, drawn to the attractive blonde beside her. A persistent lock of blonde hair teased Chrissy's left eye, tempting Samantha to tuck it back in place. Chrissy's features were delicate and refined, with her light blonde eyebrows arching gracefully over her warm, caramel brown eyes. Her nose was slender, fitting her face perfectly, while her high cheekbones lent her a Scandinavian elegance, complemented by her full, soft pink lips. A pronounced jawline tapered to Chrissy's slender neck. "What's on your mind?" Chrissy inquired with a smile, savoring her premium whiskey. "Just admiring," Samantha murmured in response. Chrissy hummed, catching Samantha's gaze in the mirror. Samantha's brunette hair cascaded in waves to her knees from her rounded face, set with deep brown eyes beneath thick eyebrows, and her slightly prominent nose. Her lips formed a precise Cupid's bow. From the mirror's perspective, Chrissy missed the charming freckles scattered across Samantha's cheeks. They lingered in silence, absorbing their reflections. Samantha smiled softly, taking another drink of whiskey, while Chrissy mirrored the action. "Kansas." "Really, Samantha? What's there for me?" Chrissy questioned. "The First Bank, as you know," Samantha replied, placing her hand gently on Chrissy's thigh. "But what about work for me?" Chrissy probed. "I can't just stay home all day while you work." "Don't worry, Chrissy, you're skilled. Helen will vouch for you," Samantha reassured. Samantha's hand stroked Chrissy's leg through her stockings, eliciting a surprised reaction as she playfully lifted the hem of Chrissy's skirt. "The plan wasn't for anyone to get hurt," Samantha confessed, still looking into the mirror. "And you should have been there sooner," Chrissy pointed out gently. "My delay was unavoidable. A minor accident held me up," Samantha explained, emptying her glass of Oakleaf whiskey. "At least we avoided a messy divorce," Chrissy noted, touching Samantha's thigh. "And thankfully, there was the insurance payout to consider." "Another round?" Terry inquired, approaching the 2 ladies. "Time to go home." Samantha looked towards Chrissy for confirmation. "Home it is," Chrissy agreed. "My comment. There is no indication that her husband experienced some great change in character or ethics, so she got what she married. Then somewhere she started sleeping her boss's wife, but the husband can't even notice his wife turned her ways. Such a big mess in the family."